Thank you all. That was very interesting from all three of you. Very smart. So, are there any questions from the audience? I'll just like to see if there are any. Let me start with a couple of questions that I had that were burning. My first question was really around sustainability, and any of you can answer this. From sensor perspective, from the smart industry perspective, and from end user perspective, all of you seem very driven to bring sustainability here. What are your thoughts around regulation? How much is regulation? Because you're looking at it from perspective of Europe versus Asia versus various regions. How are you seeing the regulation impact what you're doing? Please, any of you who wants to start?
Consumer impact. So I think we look from the Coca-Cola company perspective, we look at it as a triangle. So you have individuals making their choices, then you have the companies who are an important part of creating value, and then you have governments who basically make sure that once we as a community, as a society have agreed to something, they take care that it's made into law and then catch up on it. And we are realizing that more and more that governments are an essential part of defining those roles. If you don't put that dot on the I or crossing the T with the governments, it doesn't work long term, whether it is plastics, whether it's recycling, whether it is using of the way energy is declared for heavy industry, heavy energy usage industry. All of these parts, we realize that working with the governments is important. Being able to be transparent to them helps us to be accountable to the individuals for whom we in the end work. So I think it's a three-way model we look at it. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming more and more important that individuals make the right choices when they're choosing their governments, about making sure that they get the right stakeholders, that they don't just look for immediate growth, but also sustainable growth for them, for their countries, for their mandates.
Yeah, so to rebound on this one, I'll give you an example. Even in Singapore, for the bus industry, they follow the Euro 5 regulation compliance, which give you some limitation in terms of CO2, of fuel consumption. And then it impacts us as a service provider of maintenance strategy because we need to have the bus working in certain conditions that we know the way it's going to be driven and the way it's going to have CO2 emission is going to be on par. So that's how it impacts. So you are right, depending on the country, you have different regulations, and our customer asks us, how can I comply? So we do this, and also as well, us as a company, as Hexagon, we also have a strategy or sustainability to the point that, for instance, we don't print anymore brochures, we just use digitalization to this stage. It's also a ECSG program follow-up, and we discuss with our customers, say, how can you help you to become more sustainable, and how our software, our solution can help you. That's what we do, and you are right to adapt depending on the country.
And what we can see currently in the industry we are in, we found that I like to separate it by two parts. One part we say we want the use of energy more efficient. With current technology, in fact, we have already reduced 70% of the CO2 reduction, and the most important is the payback, in fact, can be 1.5 to 3 years. So which means for those areas, in fact, it's already like the self-reinforced cycle. You don't need so much from the government. The government intervened, can be running in a sustainable way to running sustainability. And we do see some other area, for example, like green material, right? We want to also eliminate the single use of plastics, right? Or the green package, something like that. We still see, from the purely financial point of view, is still the cost is high. Right? We need some, maybe in the beginning, some certain of government regulation, so to boosting more, then you can have the scale of economy. Then it can run in a more self-reinforced way. So it's two. I think in some certain area, for sure, the government regulation, those kind of things are quite critical.
Thank you. Andy, the other question is for you, especially since you have so much experience in supply chain optimization and managing so many smart factories across the globe. How do you see both the geopolitics and this cost of living crisis play in, and how has Schneider Electric made its new models different so that people can take care of all these spikes that are happening? Because one of the questions that come all the time from end users is, I don't know the future, how much do I need to invest in supply chain and how? How because you yourself are managing so much of it, how do you grapple with all this every day?
So to be totally honest, I don't have like a crystal ball to see what will happen tomorrow, because, for example, we don't know tomorrow who will be the president in US, right? It can some other thing can happen. But we do, in our last transformation program, we have the one pillar. We have the strive transformation. We have one pillar called resilient. And we do have the program called the power of two. So basically, for the critical product line that contribute to the major, the company profit, we already developed a huge, I would say, networking, to make sure even one side have some issue, we can still deliver. And the other part we do see, as I mentioned, the supply chain is becoming more and more regional. In our company, our strategy is, China mainly for China, and North America for North America, leveraging Mexico, and Europe for Europe, but leverage Eastern Europe. But at my region is the only region where we're not only supporting this region, basically it's India and Southeast Asia, but we are also supporting worldwide. But each of the support will also have the so-called power of two to make sure, if anything happen, we already have the capability we can switch, because we cannot predict what will be happening. And with that, in fact, we also now have a much more visibility of our tier 2, even tier 3 supplier.
Mm-hmm.
Where they are, will that one be disrupt us? We have those kind of visibility. So I would say we come out from COVID become more stronger, because one example in COVID, we suddenly find all the plastic we cannot get, because there's one very very small company in the central of, in Yunnan province of China. There's some limitation. Then the big player, Dubang, DSM, they cannot produce. Finally, we found some critical thing that even the tier 3 is super critical. So our learning is we need to build those kind of, the capability, exchangeability. So when something happens, we can switch.
Thank you. Cedric, a question for you is regarding sensors. As Damodar was pointing out, now sensors are quite common across. People talk about simple, easy to available sensors. But you spoke about something a lot more than that. There's a whole theme around it. So when a client approaches you on sensors, how do you take it up from philosophy perspective in terms of, what models do you go for, or how do you do it for any complex organization? Is there some few basic steps you follow there?
Yeah, so sensor and captor are not new, but a few years back there was a big trend about IoT. Everybody was talking about IoT or machine to machine, and they realized that capturing data was not sufficient. You capture data, but first you have to stock data somewhere, you have to read those data. So sensors become more powerful, become smaller, become to any type of device. Your phone has a lot of sensor captor. You can get temperature, you can get the acceleration. Your car has a lot of electronics. So what happened is that company and technology company have been working on how to manage all those data. And this is also one of the reasons we created this digital world, because it's easier to manage those data in the digital world to simulation rather in the real world. Real world, you have one trial. If you fail, that's it. In the digital world, you can do simulation, you can get those data, you can see how it goes. And now we have been getting back from this big data thing, because it's very expensive also to store those data. This morning we were discussing about the energy consumption of cloud and data center, artificial intelligence. So now it's more realistic, and it's part of the global strategy. We talked just now about sustainability. It's also sustainability. Where do I need to put my effort? What do I need to measure? Do I need to measure everything? Like we said, do you really need to measure what you have in your fridge and your yogurt and purchase? What's the value? But do you need to get some data from your car because you can have an accident, or your power plant? So here we see this trend. So of course, with the progress in technology, the sensors, the hardware is cheaper and cheaper, smaller and smaller. You see all the microelectronics, the chips and all the sensors, more powerful. So this is very good, but I think now we all take conscience that we know we need to understand what do we want to do with those data, how we do apply, depending on industry. And now it's really more a global strategy rather than just put sensor data everywhere. And we think that miraculously we are going to have alerts and we know what to do next. No, because it takes time to have machine learning. You need power for artificial intelligence to get something from those data, right?
Oh, thanks. Any questions from the audience? I think there's one question there.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your wonderful presentations. Just I want to know from you now, based on your experience and the kind of resources you have got for your companies, were you able to determine carbon footprint per unit of your product? And when you will be ready to stamp on the box there saying, okay, this is the carbon footprint of my product. Okay, that is one part. And second, I think the discussion is about the sensors. And earlier it was a big, when IoT came in, they say sensor, trillion sensors all over the world, and that is going to make change, they say, because you need a continuous monitoring. But you pointed out very well that now if you are going to put so many sensors, somewhere you have to store it now. And that is one of the major issues about data centers. And whether we'll get green data centers, I don't know. They say it will be more challenging. So I think all three of you have done wonderful work in that. So if you can comment on that, that will be useful for all of us. Thank you.
I could start with, because we have a very tangible footprint map, we call it. It's different in different countries for different product. So the good news first is we have been able to, the parts which we measure, we have been able to reduce. So when we look at the amount of water used in a plant, the amount of energy used in a plant, from 2015 to today, we have more than reduced 70% of the total energy going into a product. But the bad news is, the moment you have done that, you realize that your manufacturing footprint of the total product, and I talked about the total product lifecycle carbon, has shrunk from something like 48% to around 23% of the total CO2 footprint. So now we've finished the manufacturing bit, so now we are looking at to see how can we get into the planning bit, how can we get into the logistics bit, how can we work with our suppliers, how can we work with our concentrate suppliers. So there's a plant in Singapore who makes the concentrate. How can we work with them? And so power of two is very relevant there. In the end, it's the ecosystem that needs to work with it. And the more you get in, the more you'll never get to a point where you will have like 0 kilojoules per used. But what we are beginning to measure now is the green impact. So we are trying to measure what are our energy sources, what kind of energy are we buying, and then against our scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, how is our map looking like, and how can we improve the green part of whatever we are using. And that means electrifying the trucks in Singapore. It means reducing the consumption of diesel in other countries who can't afford electric trucks, etc. But it's a roadmap. It's not an overnight process. But the moment you start measuring it, that's when you start realizing things that you would not have considered even 10 years ago. And that's what sensors are making possible for us. Systems like Schneider are making it possible for us to educate our people to understand that. In the past, they would have said, why are we investing so much in doing this stuff? This is not true. They would have radicalized around the politics of something like electric trucks. Today, we are able to show them a dashboard and say, this is, if the equivalent of running a truck, electric truck instead of a diesel truck equates to 2.1 liters of diesel per 100 kilometers traveled. So look at that number and they look at it and say, okay, I cannot drive efficiently enough to be able to hit that target. So fine, I understand why we are going to switch to electric. That's a very different argument. And that helps us to transform faster even within the companies with our employees, to reskill, to change the ways we work. So that's an example of how it helps.
So if I can add, you just now mentioned that, do I know for each of the product I produce how much CO2, all of this? Now the thing is that within our own factory, own operation, I think we already have the clear visibility because we have the so-called power monitoring expert. So we know every minute, right, every hour, the different line different machine, how much energy are consuming, how much CO2 are generated, then the different layer of the floor. That one is super clear. Now the challenge is really on the component. For example, in one factory, I may have 30K components. So we need the supplier also provide that information to us. Then finally we can claim, to say for this product how much. It's I would say it's quite a big workload. We are not only can touch the most critical component. We can know that. So I think it's still a journey to go to see how we can reach that step.
No, Scope 3 is still a way to go for a
Yeah.
lot of companies. Yeah. Folks, on that, any final questions from anyone in the audience? If not, then please give a big round of applause for all three of the presenters. Thank you very much for your time.